Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another hobby stuff video. And this is another book. This is Games Workshop's How to Make Wargames Terrain. And it's one of the more interesting how-to books from Games Workshop. They do how to paint Citadel miniatures, how to paint Citadel tanks, how to paint Space Marines, and how to make Wargames terrain. This one is one of the more interesting ones. It's another old one. Doesn't necessarily need an update per se, but some of the stuff that they talk about here in terms of paints that they used, we don't have anymore. Some of the tools they show they used to produce, they don't anymore. But it's a very good book. It's another $30 book, and personally, I would say out of all of their hobby resources, supplies, and tools and whatnot, this, I think, especially for a resource in terms of how to do something, from Games Workshop, is your best bang for your buck. It gets the best bang for your buck award for how to do stuff books from Games Workshop. First off, it's decently sized, and it covers all aspects of making wargame terrain. Not, building their kits, but making wargame terrain from scratch. And they still offer it on their website, $30. I highly recommend picking this up, even if you don't make wargame terrain at all. It gives you things to think about that you can utilize for basing your models and just collecting an army. Plus, if you want to get into making wargame terrain, it's a very good resource. So, first off, we get to wet our whistle looking at some of the stuff they made from scratch here. And table of contents, you have the introduction, and right off the bat, getting started. First thing you'll notice is these little colored tabs in the pages, and those are for different sections to help you locate your section faster. And right off the bat, they talk about woods, and you can get pre-made trees, ready-made trees you can get from like train supplies stores, like those hobby stores for trains, model trains. Get a tree or a couple, cut out a base out of any material, paint it. They say paint it green, glue the trees down, add some glue to the base, put flock on it, and there you go, you got instant woods. Something you can do. Counting time for drying of everything, let's just say conservatively 45 minutes. Anyway, it's just showing you some quick things to do here. They call them pan scourer, I guess. It's basically the abrasive sponge you use to clean pots and pans with. You can use that to make hedges, and you can paint it up. And they talk about stepped hills and a gaming table. And now you're presented with pretty much everything they do here. Making a building from scratch, basing and painting, obstacles, baseboard, trees, water, and buildings again, and page numbers of where to go to see exactly what they're talking about. I'm not going to go over this book page by page because there's a lot to cover here. There's a lot of stuff in this book. But this 2-page section is important, the planning stage. They go over sketching out what you want for your table, making kind of a map, kind of a plan to follow, making a kind of a laundry list of things for the table. And they show you examples here of 3 gaming boards where they had 3 plans, well, a plan for each, kind of right next to them, just to show you what they did to make that board. Now, they say have a plan of action and all that, and then they go over the board itself, good materials to make a solid board. Making a one-piece board. They talk about using wood or polystyrene or sandwiching the two together. You can also use this to make a modular board or smaller pieces, like quarter the board up to make it easier to transport if you want. They also go over what to edge your board with to keep it strong. And then they do some simple stuff in terms of making grassland on your base, painting up desert, and then giving you a couple of recipes for making different types of deserty finishes. to continue with just this base of the board itself before you actually make terrain on it, or if you're going to sculpt terrain on it, you could still utilize this aspect. They talk about making grassland with a gaming mat. You cut it to fit, wrap it around the board so it kind of overhangs and glue it down. You can do the same thing with toweling material. Cut it the shape you want, and you can have it on top of the grassland, on top of the battle mat, or in addition to it, to give kind of like a different feel. They also go over doing urban base if you want to make an urban tabletop type of a situation. They go over textured paints, which becomes a big thing in this book. There's a lot of textured paint. Then they talk about making the grids, the slabs there, and then painting it up to make it look more realistic. Snow, same deal. You start off with textured paint, and then you go from there. But as they go, they start showing you hills. One thing I want to show you, a couple examples of, this is one example. They take the hill and they pretty much divide it up into how they began, pretty much, the mid-stage and end. Another thing here are rocky hills, same concept. They also show you a bit of painting on these, which is nice. So you can, if you want to replicate that, you can kind of see what they're painting it with and do it. Again, another step-by-step thing here is for these rock spires, which they have a spine, a central spine of like a dowel running through it, which was when I first read this, I thought it was a neat idea. And they show you this. They introduced the wire cutter here, the hot wire cutter for foam. Again, more painting recipes to do this color. And they go over woods, making your own trees, utilizing pre-made trees. One thing that's interesting about this is they go over building a donut wood. And one thing you have to keep in mind over, let's say, making displays or just scenery for like model trains and whatnot, is for war game terrain, it needs to be functional. You need to be able to have models going into the terrain to do what you want. And what they have here is the idea of this donut means the middle part can come out so models can go in there. You can go even more crazy, if you will, and have all the trees removable on the sides or the edges. I said sides weird. I don't know what that was. The sides and or the edges, whatever it is, you can make them magnetized. They don't go over magnetizing terrain here. It's very basic, which is good. It's over either you glue it down or you don't, and that's what they cover. And of course, painting and cutting and shaping to fit. They have water features, and this is a very good example of what I was talking about earlier. The basics, what you start off with, how you add to it, and how you get eventually to the end result here, which is a river. They go over canals, rapids, waterfalls, bridges, ponds or lakes, and you get the idea. Then they go on to talk about roads, the idea of using patterns you can print out from your printer and just making them look like they're naturally part of that road and aging them up a bit, which is pretty handy and cool. They go over little detail bits that accent and make the scenery pop. Obstacles like walls and fences, edge lines, stuff you can do for that. They also go over, right here's a good example. Firstly, they have this little model guy. Whenever you see this guy in a little box, it's some type of tip. And these collapsed columns are papier-mâché cake decoration columns. So that's one idea of thinking outside a box to find materials to make terrain pieces. And this, they used a doormat. And what was cool here is they took the hay, or not the hay, they made the wheat here, and they made it look trampled when you take the piece out. That way you can put models like regiment blocks for fantasy, for example, in there. So as you can see, a lot of stuff that they cover. And then they go over building buildings from scratch, making a plan for that, tips on creating the shell of the building, and they show you different styles and dimensions from fantasy all the way through to sci-fi, and how to do little accent pieces like half-timbered houses, stonework houses, walls, brickwork, concrete, doors, roofs, different styles of doing the different roofs. And of course you can apply this for fantasy, sci-fi, or even modern type of setting, depending on what you're playing. And then putting it all together, showing you the little pieces they used. Then you go over basing and painting, different painting techniques you may want to use, and materials. you may want to consider when doing your terrains. The idea of undercoating, dry brushing, overbrushing, and washes. And then they show you some board examples. And then after that, they also go into inspiration. As I thumb through, it shows some pictures of different places on Earth as well as the moon. And give you just different things for inspiration, some sketches, and then some pictures from the Lord of the Rings movie for inspiration. And here at the end they start going over the materials. And here they go over materials both for the board itself, different types from styrene to styrofoam to balsa wood to different types of regular wood like sheet, pressure board wood I think it is, and plywood and all that, cardboard, cardstock, foam card, plastic rotting. Through all these they give you pros and cons for each piece. You know, this is good for using a base, but it doesn't sculpt well. This will melt if you use spray paint on it, stuff like that. Then they go over other stuff like filler, texture paint, green stuff, air hardening clay, again pros and cons, bitbox, knickknacks, things you can use, toweling, pins, things you can use, wires to make trees or make other detailed bits, and pros and cons for that. They go over flocking materials and the different pros and cons for using them, and also other stuff like wire wool, bristles from a brush, rubberized horsehair, doormats, pan scours, things like that. Then they also go into other supplies you'll need. They go over resin, 2-part epoxy resin that they use for water effects, spray paints, regular paints, Citadel paint, clear varnish, gloss and matte varnish that they use for water effects as well, oil paints. They go over the pros and cons for that. And for example, one thing that I thought was interesting that I didn't know before this is that aquarium plants, you need oil paints to paint on them. Aquarium plants doesn't hold non-oil based paints really well. Then you have things that Citadel offers, which you could probably find some of the similar stuff from third parties if you wanted to, but being a Games Workshop book, of course, they're going to show you what they offer. Just do a double check online if you're going to try and use this book, because some of these pieces down here I don't think they offer anymore. The Fortress piece they do, but I don't think they offer the Mordenheim architecture anymore. And then other tools, essential tools to have: brushes, knives, steel, rulers, permanent marker or pencil, clippers, graph paper, sandpaper, which is good for sanding stuff and to use as part of the terrain itself, which they talk about. They go over a lot of the tools. Jeweler's saw, water pot, PVA glue, mixing pot, super glue, plastic glue, pin vise, palette, miter box, and then they have additional tools, basically a hobby rotary tool, kind of like a Dremel, jigsaws, sanders, hot wire cutter. This is one that they used to offer. They don't sell it anymore through Games Workshop, but you can find them. T-square, a dust mask, which I think would be kind of an essential tool instead of an additional tool. Bread knife they also recommend using to get kind of a ragged look. Sanding pads, a vise, pins, razor saw, sculpting tool, and so on. And the end with the Citadel color paints and inks range, which is outdated, so you can't trust this completely. But even for being an old book, very helpful. Not just for 40k or fantasy or Lord of the Rings, but any type of wargaming situation. I like it because it's pretty much showing you how to make stuff from scratch. So it's kind of a resource that they give you so you can make your own terrain, and not even use any of their own terrain, although you probably will, and I know I will because it looks cool. But I like the fact that they're selling this kind of how to make wargames terrain book, because I think it helps keep the creative juices flowing instead of just stagnating and buying pre-made kits for terrain, and that's something I like. So this is something I highly recommend getting. They still sell it online, so pick it up if you want to. It's $30. Highly recommend it. Like I said, best bang for the buck in my opinion for their how to paint or how to make books. So that's it, and until next time, take it easy.